In the first episode of Real Time with Bill Maher in about a month, the entire panel exploded when Trump-supporting Republican Congressman Dan Crenshaw attempted to downplay the January 6th insurrection and then falsely suggested that Democrats are guilty of comparable things, resulting in Maher, CNN host Caitlin Collins, and Democratic strategist James Carville ruthlessly shutting him down with fact checks. But before we unpack all that, if you end up liking this video and you want to support the channel, please be sure to hit the like, subscribe, and alert bells before you go. All right, friends, we have several clips to talk about in this video. As I said, Real Time with Bill Maher has been off the air for about a month, and when last we saw Maher, he was pretty demoralized about the state of the 2024 election and publicly urging President Biden to step down. Well, that's happened, and now he's back, and the topic did turn to elections, the 2024 election, which of course led to talks about January 6th and the peaceful transfer of power, and Dan Crenshaw was on. And I should say Crenshaw pitches himself as a moderate Republican. He doesn't style himself as a MAGA Republican like Marjorie Taylor Greene or Lauren Boebert, because he'll occasionally criticize his own party. The problem is, like most other Republican politicians, ultimately Crenshaw puts party above country, and he does it here, and it leads to pretty explosive results.
Can you imagine, can you tell me a scenario where he loses, maybe even by more, and he concedes the election? Can you imagine him saying, I've seen the results, and I'd like to congratulate Kamala Harris on running a good campaign? It's impossible to imagine.
I don't have to imagine. I don't have to imagine any of it because I know the history of it. And the history of it is he moved out of the White House. There was a peaceful transition of power, and there was an inauguration on January 21st.
He tried everything not to do that.
They tried to do the same unconstitutional process that Democrats did in the last three elections when Republicans
won. The Democrats sent fake electors. The Democrats pressured the Justice Department. The Democrats went to court and got laughed out of it. No, that never happened in any other election.
You're talking about utilizing the legal process. Now, I disagree with the fact that there should even be a process to decertify an election. But Democrats did it 3 times in the elections prior to that. Where was the hand-wringing then? Stacey Abrams has never said that she lost the governor's race in Georgia.
And that's
wrong.
Nobody
wrings their hands about
it. That's wrong, and it's a false equivalency to sending.
It is a false equivalence. There's so much wrong with and dishonest about what Dan Crenshaw said there. So listen. There are legal avenues for candidates of either party to challenge election results, to demand audits and recounts. Okay, Donald Trump availed himself of his legal rights to do so. 60 court cases that he spammed out across the country. Some he lost on standing, some he lost on the merits, some he was just laughed out of court, even by conservative Trump-appointed justices. So he tried and failed. He did not have a constitutional right to send fake electors to the Capitol to defraud the American people. He didn't have a constitutional or legal right to try to pressure Mike Pence, the vice president, to just unilaterally throw out results that he didn't like. He had no right to engage in those conspiracies, which is why Trump has been indicted in Georgia and in Washington, D.C. by federal and state prosecutors on those unlawful acts. So Dan Crenshaw is lying when he suggests that everything Trump did was unlawful. The insurrection was not lawful. The conspiracy was not lawful. And there's no counterpart to this in the Democratic Party. Al Gore accepted the results of an election. John Kerry accepted the results of the election. Hillary Clinton came out the next day and formally, publicly conceded the race. She didn't conspire with then Vice President Joe Biden, a Democrat, or the sitting Democratic President Barack Obama to throw out results that she didn't like. None of that happened. Democratic politicians are just objectively morally superior to their Republican counterparts, and particularly on issues of elections. Stacey Abrams, what she said in 2018 was wildly irresponsible, but she was also not the governor. She was not the president. She wasn't a candidate for president. She was a candidate for governor. And I should point out that Brian Kemp, the Secretary of State of Georgia at the time, did engage in some shenaniganry like voter roll purges, and audits after the fact have concluded that there were tens of thousands of Georgians who should not have been purged, that were inappropriately purged, which may have upset the results of the election. But when she ran against him again in 2022 and she lost, she formally conceded as well. So there's just no any sort of attempt to create an equivalence here is false. Donald Trump was the sitting president of the United States, the most powerful man in the world, which means with power and responsibility scale. That's a Spider-Man notion, right? With great power comes great responsibility. It's a notion that we all used to at least pay lip service to. The most powerful man, therefore, has the highest obligation civically, morally, and constitutionally to conduct himself. And he didn't. He failed. Okay. And the last thing I'll say, there wasn't a peaceful transfer of power. Dan Crenshaw says there was, but he's lying. The peaceful transfer of power doesn't begin and end on January 20th of an election year. January 6th is part of the peaceful transfer of power. It's a crucial, necessary first step. You can't have January 20th with one president passing over the torch if you don't first have January 6th, in which the results of an election are certified by Congress. Donald Trump shattered that by sicking a violent mob on the Capitol. So yes, Donald Trump did break the peaceful transfer of power, and he should be condemned for it, and Democrats have never done anything comparable. So I also want to play this other clip here, because CNN host Caitlin Collins jumps in also with some fact checks and also points out some other meaningful distinctions about the shenanigans that Trump engaged in 2020 that Democrats simply never have.
To act like what Democrats have done before, which is often something that Republicans, when we have them on my show, say when we talk about January 6th and the fake electors and Trump refusing to admit that he lost the election. There was barely a peaceful transfer of power. They actually wouldn't even allow them to move forward with getting federal funding to start the transition for weeks. I remember it was because we found out about a little known position that no one in the federal government even really knew much about because of that. But also, the difference then is Joe Biden went and certified the election. He was the vice president then, and he certified Donald Trump's election and
so did Mike
there
Pence.
was not a massive.
Because
Mike Pence was pressured not to by Donald Trump.
The entire process.
So again, these are also important distinctions worth pointing out. I mentioned it, which is that ironically, it was a Democratic president and Democratic vice president and Democratic candidate in Hillary Clinton. So you had Barack Obama, the president, Joe Biden, the vice president, presiding over January 6th. And the candidate Hillary Clinton, none of them ever did or attempted to do the things that Donald Trump did. Hillary Clinton didn't try to sue her way into the White House like Donald Trump. She had a right to try. She never availed herself of it because she's a patriot who loves her country, unlike Donald Trump. Vice President Biden didn't conspire or feel the pressure to throw out results that of an election that he clearly didn't like. He just did his job. And as a matter of fact, when a small, paltry handful of Democratic politicians continued to offer informal objections in the congressional hearing in which the certification was being done, the vice president shut them down, said enough's enough, time to move on. So again, point for Joe Biden. And Barack Obama, the sitting president of the United States, also didn't attempt to use his position as the most powerful person in the world to corruptly influence the results of the election. So all three of those politicians are just objectively by far morally superior to the MAGA Republican cultists. Also a great distinction that we all forget about, including me, right, is not only did Trump try to sue his way into the White House, not only did he trigger an insurrection, not only did he engage in conspiracy, but the Trump administration has within it the General Services Administration, the GSA, and it's responsible for providing funding and intelligence briefs and material to an incoming administration. It happens in every election when there's a lame duck president or the president who is eligible for a second term was defeated. Their administration is supposed to provide the federal funding and the intelligence briefings to the incoming administration to begin that transition process. The Trump administration blocked it for weeks, funding and intelligence briefing, putting the incoming Biden administration on a perilous back foot. Again, just an objectively moral failing of a Republican presidency that has never happened in a Democratic presidency. So kudos to Caitlin Collins for pointing that out. As you can see here, Dan Crenshaw is, again, just totally outmatched. He just doesn't want to contend with the fact that his party is worse, and particularly on this issue by far. I also, while I was sitting at the airport yesterday in O'Hare, trying to come back from the DNC, I also took the time to roast Congressman Crenshaw because in response to Vice President Harris, rolling out an ambitious, agenda for her first term in office, he said, if only there was someone who was in a position of power to do all of the things Kamala Harris is saying we should do right now, like someone in the administration, a vice president or something. Oh, wait. He's suggesting that because Kamala Harris is currently the vice president of the United States, that she should be able to do whatever she says she's going to do in her first term, thus implying why she's too incompetent to get it done. To which I responded, if only there was someone in a position of power who understood how bills become law and that a Democratic president would need a fully Democratic Congress to pass her agenda, something she doesn't have yet, like someone in government, a Republican congressman from Texas. So Dan Crenshaw is either lying or he's stupid, but right now Republicans control the House of Representatives. They would never go along with a Harris policy agenda. They would obstruct it every sense of the way, and therefore none of those bills could become law to enact that agenda. So again, stupid or dishonest. And also the fact of the matter is the vice president is not in charge. She is second in command, but Joe Biden is still her boss. Joe Biden is still the leader of the country and the leader of the executive branch. So to whatever extent they have any policy differences, even if she had a fully Democratic Congress, she still, if there was any distinction between her and Biden on policy, which in some cases there are, she still couldn't get it done because she has a boss she reports to. So the last thing I'll say is that the DNC also dropped this really good ad about January 6th to kind of wrap it up in a bow using unseen footage or previously unreleased footage of January 6th. So bringing it all the way back to Dan Crenshaw's really pathetic downplaying of the severity of the insurrection. The DNC has this ad which reminds you of its unprecedented severity.
We will never give up. We will never concede. It doesn't happen. You don't concede when there's theft involved. And after this, we're going to walk down, and I'll be there with you. We're going to walk down to the Capitol, because you'll never take back our country with weakness. You have to show strength, and you have to be strong.
It does look like we're going to have an ad hoc march stepping off here. There's a crowd surge heading east.
Mike Pence, I hope you're going to stand up for the good of our Constitution and for the good of our country. And if you're not, I'm going to be very disappointed in you. I will tell you right now.
We're going to give riot warnings as soon as the apparatus here. We're going to give riot warnings. We're going to try to get compliance, but this is now effectively a riot.
49 hours declaring it a riot.
5 to 50 be advised. They're trying to breach and get to the Capitol.
Hold the line! Hold the line! Hold the line!
We have a breach of the Capitol. Breach of the Capitol to the upper level.
Mike Pence didn't have the courage to do what should have been done to protect our country and our Constitution.
Bring out Pence! Bring out Pence! Bring out Pence!
We can't hold this. We're going to get too many people. Look at this vantage point, man.
We're trying to hold the alphabet. We're trying to hold the alphabet down.
We need an area for the House members. They're all walking over now through the tunnels.
We need to move now.
Copy.
If we lose any more time, we may lose the ability to leave. So if we're going to leave, we need to do it now. We lost the line. We lost the line. All MPD, pull back. All MPD, pull back into the upper deck. H208 with 4 members. The doors barricade. There's people flooded the hallways outside. We have no way out.
Officers still remaining on the House floor, so we can secure the members on the other side. Copy.
Get him up! Get him up!
And if I win, I will be looking very, very strongly about pardons. And I mean full pardons with an apology to many, an apology. They were peaceful people. These were great people. The crowd was unbelievable. And I mentioned the word love, the love in the air. I've never seen anything like it.
It's a very powerful ad that makes the case. Again, this is the event that Dan Crenshaw is trying to downplay and trying to falsely suggest that Democrats have done comparable things to. It's absolutely categorically ridiculous. The fact of the matter is that Donald Trump and MAGA Republicans are uniquely dangerous and uniquely reprehensible with respect to resisting the peaceful transfer of power and rejecting free and fair elections. And these are things to keep in mind as we head towards the November election. Let me know what you think in the comments.